What you thought would be a quiet night alone, a peaceful apartment, or just a casual visit to a friend's house, quickly transforms into a nightmare you'll never be able to forget. Shadows that follow you, whispers in the dark, and a presence that makes it feel like you're never really alone. These are the true experiences of those who dared to live or stay in places where the line between reality and horror fades away. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another night of spine-chilling terror. Tonight, we dive into 3 heart-pounding tales of real-life paranormal encounters where the unexplainable forces of the supernatural make their presence known in the most terrifying ways. From ghostly figures haunting apartments to unnerving experiences that blur the line between the living and the dead, tonight's stories will leave you questioning what's lurking just out of sight. So grab a seat, turn the lights down low, and prepare yourself for a journey into the unknown. If you've had your own creepy experiences, drop them in the comments or send them directly to nightterrorxinbox@gmail.com. And if you want more stories that will keep you up at night, like, subscribe, and make sure you hit that bell for more terrifying tales. Whispers from the Stairwell. So I was talking to my cousin one night, and he said something I'll never forget. You remember that apartment we lived in after school? I still can't sleep with the lights off because of that place. It started right after we graduated. My cousin and I moved into this small 2-story unit on the edge of a quiet town in northern Oregon. It was cheap, close to the beach, and surrounded by pine woods. At first glance, it looked decent, even modern, new paint outside, updated windows. But something about the building felt off. The yard was cracked and uneven, like the ground had shifted recently, and the upstairs hallway was strangely crooked, like whoever built it didn't use a level. Inside, there were parts of the place that looked like someone had just given up. Half-painted walls, doors that didn't quite fit their frames, electrical outlets placed too high or too low. But we figured it was just a rushed renovation, and we didn't care. It was ours. We were the first ones to move in after the renovation. At least, that's what the landlord claimed. Our parents visited now and then, and even years later, all of us still bring up the weird stuff that happened in that apartment. The layout alone was bizarre. Sharp angles, narrow rooms, and a steep wooden staircase that split the living room from the upper floor. Every time I stood at the top of those stairs, I had this insane urge to glance down, almost as if I expected someone to dart past at the bottom. I couldn't explain it, but that feeling was always there. And what's messed up is, it started. The very first night we moved in, I was sitting with my mom on the couch watching some late-night comedy rerun. It was around 9 p.m., and only the kitchen light and a single floor lamp were on. The rest of the apartment was wrapped in shadows. Then it happened. Without warning, the air in the room changed. It was like the oxygen had been sucked out. Not cold, not warm, just wrong. Heavy, like standing underwater. We both froze. I mean, literally couldn't move. I looked at her, and she looked at me, wide-eyed, neither of us speaking. Then out of the corner of my eye, a shadow appeared on the wall, not cast by anything, not from anywhere. It moved. A hazy, human-sized silhouette crept up the wall behind the TV, diagonally, like it was walking upstairs that weren't there. No features, no face, just a shadow, going upward. Then it vanished. We bolted, Didn't even grab our shoes. We stood outside, shivering, waiting until my cousin and uncle got back. They found us out there, pale and shaking. That was just the beginning. A couple weeks later, I went to see a horror movie with some friends. I don't even remember the name. Something about ghosts speaking through static. It was dumb, honestly. But that night I went to bed like normal. No creepy thoughts in my head. Then around 1 a.m., my alarm clock exploded to life. Full volume static, blasting right in my ear. I shot up, heart racing, tried to turn it off. It didn't respond. I smacked the button, pulled the plug, nothing. Then suddenly it stopped. Silence. I sat there in the dark, breathing hard. I eventually crashed back to sleep out of sheer exhaustion. But in the morning, that's when it got weirder. The alarm clock wasn't plugged in. The cord was stretched across the floor and tucked under my bed, far from any outlet. I hadn't touched it. That same week, we had some friends over. Drinks, music, good times. We were all in the living room when my cousin's old stereo kicked on by itself, blasting some strange, grainy song, something none of us recognized. It wasn't a preset station or anything. It was like old carnival music, warped and high-pitched, and not a single one of us was near the thing. Everyone went dead quiet. Then someone tried to laugh it off, but before they could even speak, a scream pierced the room. From upstairs, a girl's scream, shrill, echoing. We all froze. It wasn't faint, like something from outside. It was above us, directly above. One of the guys said it had to be a neighbor. But we all knew that apartment was empty. No one had moved in yet. And then came the night I heard the table tennis. It was around 2 a.m. I'd fallen asleep on the couch and woke up thirsty. I walked toward the laundry room, which connected to the garage. That's where we kept an old ping-pong table. I turned the tap, cupped some water into my mouth, then stopped. I heard it. Tap, 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 tap. The sound of a ball bouncing, then a paddle striking it, then a return, back and forth. There was no mistaking it. Someone was playing. I stood there frozen. No one else was home except my mom, and she was sound asleep upstairs. I pressed my ear to the door. It got louder. Tap, whack, tap. Like a full game being played. I couldn't bring myself to open the door. I backed away slowly, trying not to make a sound, and hurried back to the couch. I pulled the blanket over my head like a kid and forced myself to sleep. The next morning I sat down to eat breakfast with my mom. And I swear to you, the first thing she said was, "You and your friends were up late last night. I heard you playing ping pong around 3. I nearly dropped my spoon. I hadn't said a word to her, but she'd heard it too. The last thing that happened still makes my skin crawl. One night I was crashing at a friend's house when my phone buzzed. It was my cousin calling from our apartment. He sounded pissed. "Dude, how drunk are you? I can hear you trying to unlock the front door. Stop messing around." I blinked. "I'm not home. I'm still at Derek's." There was a long pause. Then he just said, "Okay," and hung up. 5 minutes later, he called back, his voice shaking. Right after we hung up, he said he heard something big, huge, running alongside the house. It barreled from the front yard to the side gate. Then came the pounding, loud, urgent knocking on the back door. But when he opened it, nothing, not a soul in sight. That was the night we stopped pretending the apartment was just old or quirky. There was something in that place, something unfinished, unseen, like a memory that never faded. Even now, when we talk about it, we get chills. Some places don't want to be lived in, and some things don't like being disturbed. So if you ever find yourself at the top of a narrow staircase, staring down into darkness, and you feel like something's waiting at the bottom, don't look too long. It might look back. The Watcher on Briar Hill. So I was crashing at my cousin Haley's place one weekend when she leaned over during a movie and said, "There's something I never told anyone, not even my mom. But I think I was haunted during my first year of college." Of course, I laughed at first, but her face stayed serious, and what she told me next still makes my skin crawl. In 2018, Haley had just started her freshman year at a small university outside Indianapolis. Her dad, doing well financially, offered to cover the cost of an apartment so she wouldn't have to juggle rent, work, and school. After months of apartment tours and neighborhood scouting, Haley and her mom finally picked a quiet unit at the edge of a suburb called Briar Hill. It was a modern 3-story complex with crisp landscaping and a buzz-in security gate that made it feel safe. Her unit was on the top floor, and the manager mentioned that hers was the first one finished after a recent remodel, new floors, fresh paint, updated kitchen. Haley, being a creative soul, decorated her place in bright, cheerful themes, colorful throw pillows, framed watercolor art, and her favorite part, a flutter of stick-on butterflies arranged outside her bedroom door. Dozens of them, almost like a living mural, blue, orange, gold, spiraling upward as if taking flight. The first night after classes, she came home around 10 p.m., dropped her bag by the door, and headed to her room to get ready for bed. The apartment was dim, except for a small hallway light between her bathroom and bedroom. When she reached her door, something caught her eye. One of the butterflies had fallen. It lay right in the center of her bedroom threshold. Odd but harmless, she figured. The adhesive must not have stuck properly. She pressed it back on the wall and didn't think much of it. But that night she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It clung to her like a second skin. She told herself it was just nerves, new place, first time living alone. Still, sleep only came around 3 a.m. The next night, same thing. She came home late and another butterfly had fallen. A different one, same exact spot. And again, the sticky side was clean and strong. This time she pressed it down firmly, running her palm along it several times. But every few nights, a butterfly would fall. Always in the doorway, always a different one. At first, she convinced herself it was coincidence. Maybe airflow, maybe cheap adhesive. But it only happened when she was alone. When friends or her mom visited, the butterflies stayed in place and the apartment felt normal, quiet, peaceful even. Months passed. The falling butterflies became routine. And that strange heaviness at night, the feeling of invisible eyes following her, grew stronger. She never heard anything, nothing moved, but that presence, it never went away. It lived in the corners of her vision, in the silence between creaks, just under the hum of the refrigerator. She stopped inviting people over as much. She couldn't explain it, and she didn't want them to think she was losing it. Then came the closet. 6 months in, her bedroom closet began to rattle. Just softly at first, like something was shifting inside. It always started around midnight and lasted for hours. Every time she worked up the courage to open the door, the noise would stop. She thought about sleeping on the couch, but she was tall, and the love seat was tiny. So she stayed in her room, staring at the closet door every night, blankets pulled up to her chin, adrenaline running dry by morning. She began to dread coming home. She begged friends to crash with her, just so she could get a full night's sleep. When they were around, the apartment was calm. Nothing ever happened when someone else was present, but she couldn't rely on others forever. Eventually, she broke. She decided to move out. Her long-term boyfriend, now her husband, came to help her pack over the weekend. It was winter, and a blizzard was blowing through town. They spent the whole day boxing up clothes and supplies. She was tired, but also strangely relieved. With someone there, maybe she could sleep for one last night without the creeping dread. But something was different that night. For the first time, whatever had been tormenting her made itself known to someone else. They lay in bed, both wide awake, staring into the ceiling. Neither spoke. The air felt suffocating, dense like molasses. Then in a low voice, her boyfriend whispered, "We need to get out of this apartment." His voice was firm, uneasy. That's when Haley knew it wasn't just her. He felt it too. And he was so disturbed that he said he'd rather sleep in his freezing car than spend another minute in that bedroom. She pleaded with him to stay inside. It wasn't safe to be out in the snow. So they dragged blankets to the living room floor, as far away from her bedroom as they could get. That night, she barely slept a wink. After she moved out, things got worse. Instead of relief, she spiraled. Her thoughts were foggy. Time blurred. Days went missing. She would zone out for hours, giggling or mumbling to someone no one else could see. Her boyfriend grew alarmed. One night, when he tried to place a rosary around her neck, she hurled him across the room like he weighed nothing. He swore it wasn't her. It was like something else took over. He brought her to a small chapel in town. There they met a gentle woman named Grace, who carried a vial of holy water she'd brought back from Rome. It had been blessed by the Pope himself. Grace placed a drop of it on Haley's forehead and began reciting a prayer. Haley doesn't remember what happened next. She blacked out. When she came to, she was on the floor, crying in Grace's arms. The woman's face was pale. She said, "It left. I saw it leave you. I don't know what it was, but it's gone now." From that moment on, Haley was free. The fog lifted, the heaviness disappeared, the butterflies never fell again. She started sleeping through the night. She went back to school, back to work, and back to laughing without fear catching in her throat. But every so often, when she's alone and the hallway light flickers, she swears she can feel it again, watching, waiting, just outside the bedroom door. Would you ever stay a night in a place like that, alone? The Shadow on Cypress Hole. A friend of mine, Jake, told me this after we went camping last fall. We were swapping ghost stories by the fire when he leaned in and said, "You want to hear something that still messes with my head?" What he told me next gave me chills. And I don't get scared easily. Back in his junior year, Jake went to school in Ohio and lived in an apartment building just off a place called Cypress Hall, kind of tucked away near the river. It wasn't anything fancy, just a low-rise building with long hallways and old paint. The kind of place you pass 100 times and never notice. But he said it always had this heavy stillness, like the air itself didn't want to move. He lived there with 3 other students. It was supposed to be temporary housing, cheap, shared rent, and close to campus. But almost from the beginning things felt off. Not dramatic at first, just weird. They'd all talk about how they felt like they were being watched, even when they were alone. You know that tingle at the back of your neck when you feel eyes on you? That. Constantly. Jake told me one night he was painting a piece for his art elective. Everyone else had gone out. so he had the place to himself. He set up in the common area with his sketchbook and started working. An hour in, he couldn't shake the sensation that something, or someone, was behind him. He kept glancing over his shoulder, expecting to see a roommate back early or someone playing a prank. But there was never anything there. It wasn't just paranoia. He said it was like the room changed temperature, like the walls themselves were leaning in. Then things started happening to all of them. Another night, one of his roommates, Marcy, was working on a project late. Jake had gone to bed, lights off, door closed. Marcy swore she saw someone walk past the hallway entrance and vanish toward Jake's room. Thinking it was him, she followed, only to find him fast asleep, headphones in, totally out cold. And the thing is, she said she felt something behind her when she turned around, like someone breathing on her neck. The hallway was empty, but the air, ice cold. Jake didn't know about her story at first, but later that week, he was in bed reading when the room got darker. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him, like maybe he was dozing off. But then he realized it wasn't the lights dimming. A shadow had fallen over his book. He moved, shifted position, even angled the page. The shadow stayed put. When he whipped his head around, expecting to see someone behind him, nothing. Absolutely nothing. Still, he didn't tell anyone. Not until Halloween. They had a party at the apartment. You know the kind. Loud music, cheap beer, everyone in half-hearted costumes. Around 1 a.m., people started trading creepy stories. Someone mentioned how the apartment had a weird vibe, like it was darker than it should have been, even with the lights on. That's when Marcy brought up the hallway figure she saw. Jake's face went pale. He told her about the shadow over his book, and they realized both stories happened on the same night. It spiraled from there. Other guests started chiming in with things they'd felt, like someone standing behind them on the balcony. And 2 girls who'd stayed over on different weekends both described having the same dream. They were paralyzed, floating inches above their beds, then spinning violently in the air until they woke up gasping. Neither of them had told the other until that night. Same dream, same apartment. After Halloween, Jake started seeing something, a dark shape at the edge of his vision. He never saw it clearly. Just a flicker in the hallway, a blur in the bathroom mirror. He figured he was sleep-deprived, until someone else saw it too. One night, Jake and a friend were eating dinner at the small kitchen table. As he was reaching for his drink, his eyes darted toward the hallway. The shadow was there again, but before he could even speak, his friend froze and asked, "Did you see that?" Jake played dumb. "See what?" His friend didn't miss a beat. "That black thing in the hall." They both sat in silence, too afraid to move. Then came winter break. His roommates all left early, but Jake stayed back a few extra days. He didn't want to be alone in the apartment, so he invited another friend over. They were just hanging out, deciding whether to go grab food, when Jake went to brush his teeth. He left the bathroom door open so they could keep talking. Then the apartment went quiet. That's when he heard it. A voice, inches from his ear, whispering his name, clear, sharp, male. He spun around, toothbrush still in his hand. No one. His friend hadn't moved. When Jake asked, "Did you just say something?" The look on his friend's face said it all. He hadn't. After that, Jake reached out to a few local paranormal groups. He wasn't one of those ghost hunting types, but he needed answers. The teams were interested, said the place matched stories they'd heard before. But when Jake brought it up to his roommates after break, they shut it down, said it was all in his head, that he was freaking out over nothing. He still regrets not letting those teams investigate. Eventually, he had enough. He got some holy water from a nearby chapel and came back to the apartment with it in a Ziploc bag, feeling like a total lunatic. But he was desperate. He went from room to room, sprinkling it along the doorways, the corners, even the air vents. While he did, he spoke out loud. "This is my space. You're not welcome here. You need to leave." After that, it stopped. No more shadows, no more whispers. The air felt lighter, like the apartment could finally breathe again. But even now, years later, Jake wonders if it really left, or just went quiet. You ever stay somewhere that felt wrong, even if you couldn't explain why? Jake says if you ever do, don't ignore it. Some places remember what happened in their walls, and some things don't like being forgotten.